Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Real quick, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content. Check us out on Apple and Spotify. If you're listening on podcasting platforms, give us a 5-star review if you enjoy. What's up, everyone? On this episode, I have a few thoughts that I want to get off my chest before I KO for the night. We're going to be discussing Caleb Williams' struggles and OTAs, my theory for why the Patriots drafted Joe Milton, why I'm not writing off Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. The Cleveland Browns, I don't think we're ever going to see them get the Houston version of Deshaun Watson. I got thoughts on the Falcons defense and my expectations for Malik Nabers' rookie season with the New York Giants. Before you dive into it, here's a quick word from our partner, Mint Mobile. When you pay your phone bill, do you always tell yourself, man, I'm spending way too much money on this shit? Are you looking to save? Our partner Mint Mobile has you covered with plans as low as $15 a month that give you unlimited talk, text, and high-speed data on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile right now and start saving on your monthly phone bill. Go to trymintmobile.com/JT Sports or click the link in the description or pick comment below to get access to premium wireless for as low as $15 a month. Right now, new customers that purchase a Mint Mobile plan before May 31st will also receive a 6-month subscription to Paramount Plus for no additional cost. So what are you waiting for? Switching to Mint is easy. It only takes 15 minutes to do. You can get a new phone or keep the current one that you got. Go to trymintmobile.com/JT Sports or click the link in the description or pin comment below and start saving on your monthly phone bill and get a 6-month subscription to Paramount Plus for no additional charge when you sign up before May 31st. Hurry, this offer won't last long, so switch to Mint Mobile today. Caleb Williams, for the last year and a half, has been hyped up to be the messiah of all quarterback prospects. He's been compared to Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and with him getting drafted number 1 overall by Chicago, as you can expect, expectations are through the roof for this dude. And one thing that you don't want to hear if you're a Bears fan right now is that he's struggling in OTAs. He's throwing passes in the dirt. He's having a difficult time getting the play calls in before the play clock expires. And then he recently got benched in one pass OTA session. Now, I don't think anybody should be concerned about Caleb Williams' slow start right now, because these are OTAs. What this is for him to get a little bit more acclimated to the speed of the game, continue to learn the offense, get better timing and chemistry with his teammates. What you want to hear is him making gradual improvement from now to minicamp to training camp to week 1 of the upcoming NFL season. Okay? Now, of course, with all the hype that he's received, you expect him to hit the ground running, but making the transition from the college game to the NFL game can take some time, especially when it comes to getting the play calls in, because in college, you don't really huddle like that. After every play, you look to the sideline and there's either a guy with a play with, some signs for what the next play is going to be or some hand signals. In the NFL, however, it's much different from how you get the plays in college, because you got to huddle every single play. And for Caleb Williams, having longer terminology definitely is going to be something that he's going to have to take some time to get a better understanding of, and being able to get the plays out fast and getting everybody set. Everybody makes it seem like, having a quarterback like Caleb Williams is just going to be easy peasy. You still have to find a way to develop this guy. It's not like this dude is just going to come in already tailor-made and you don't have to do any coaching for him. And I expected Caleb Williams to struggle early in OTAs. This is what OTAs are for you to learn, get better timing and chemistry with your teammates. Now, when minicamp comes around, you want Caleb Williams to improve. And then once we get the training camp and the preseason, you want to continue to see more improvement out of Caleb Williams. And then once week 1 gets here, this is when you expect Caleb Williams to be ready and to be able to put it all together. I don't think if you're a Bears fan, you have any reasons right now to be concerned about Caleb Williams. I think many people have been waiting for the opportunity to start going with these Caleb Williams is a bust narratives. And everybody has already been trying to say he's a bust even before he's been drafted. I think it's more so been rooted in hate. Yes, he had a few off games at USC, but for the most part, he had some outstanding tape that he put on display under Lincoln Riley and the Trojans. And Lincoln Riley has a fantastic record when it comes to how his quarterbacks pan out in the NFL. For the people that are trying to use Caleb Williams' OTA struggles as a justification for why Justin Fields never should have gotten traded, I think that you're severely overreacting. Caleb Williams right now, to me, is already better than Justin Fields, and I think he's a top 10 quarterback, and I don't need to see him play a single NFL snap for me to be able to put that label on him. Some guys like CJ Stroud, who I also said was going to be a top 10 quarterback last year out the gate, are just that good. And with Caleb Williams, he meets that kind of eye test. And I'm not worried about him struggling and, a tank top and shorts. Obviously, you expect this guy with all the hype that he's received to be a lot better right now, but you still have to coach this dude up. He's not a finished product. He's far from that. Peyton Manning struggled his rookie season. There's been plenty of all-time greats that struggled out the gate. Now, Caleb Williams shouldn't struggle year one. All right, it's just taking a little bit of time for him to get his feet under him. But I expect for him to start making some big plays as we progress throughout the remainder of this offseason. But to just try to write this dude off as a bust just because he's struggling in OTAs is just utterly ridiculous. Now, of course, you do have a right to be super critical of him because with him getting compared to Patrick Mahomes, him supposed to be a more refined version of Mahomes, you definitely expect for him to be a lot better than what he has shown up to this point in OTAs. Now, he hasn't thrown a lot of interceptions, but he's thrown a lot of almost interceptions. Maybe his teammates are intentionally dropping them so they don't, hurt his confidence. I'm expecting Caleb Williams to play at a really high level for Chicago this year. He easily should have the best quarterback performance that we've seen out of this franchise at this position in over a decade. They haven't had a competent quarterback since Jake Cutler. And Mitch Trubisky doesn't count. He's always been garbage to me. I'm not worried about CW18. This dude is going to be fine. I get that people don't like him because he can come off a little bit, he has some feminist tendencies to him. He also likes to paint his nails. He's a little bit odd, okay? But he's the new generation of quarterbacks that we have entering the game when some of these guys kind of going to be a little bit diva-ish, have some feminine qualities about themselves, but I don't really care about all the extra stuff. You can paint your nails all you want to as long as you're producing on the field and you're winning games. I don't care about him crying in his mom's arms after USC lost to Washington. If anything, that shows passion. That shows that this dude wants to win. People take every small thing with Caleb Williams that's a negative, and they amplify it times 100 to further try to push this BS narrative that he's going to be a bust. Like, I'm willing to bet money that Caleb Williams lives up to the hype. Is it going to be easy? No, it's not. Are there going to be some growing pains? Yes, but CJ Stroud, who most of us consider to have the best rookie season ever for a first-year quarterback, even he had a couple of off games. That's just what happens with first-year quarterbacks. Caleb Williams is going to be fine. I'm not going to make a big deal of his OTA struggles as long as he continues to prove during the offseason. Now, if we hear some rumblings about him getting outperformed by Tyson Badgett leading up to their week 1 game, then I'll start to, maybe have some doubts. But Caleb Williams is going to be fine. No reason to panic. He's a rookie. He's trying to get settled into the game. He's going to be okay. I got a theory for why the Patriots drafted Joe Milton. You got Drake May, who you took 3rd overall, right? And Drake May has been labeled as a project. He's not going to be day 1 material. Same thing with Joe Milton. The only difference between Drake May and Joe Milton is that Joe Milton is an older project. Okay, and he has a lot more things to work on compared to May. But my reasoning for why I think the Patriots took Joe Milton is because they wanted to have an insurance plan just in case Drake May doesn't end up panning out, which I think is really smart on the behalf of Gerard Mayo. You never want to handicap yourself to one quarterback. A good situation was back when the Washington Redskins at the time, they took RG3 behind Andrew Luck, but in a few rounds later, they took Kirk Cousins. And we saw how that situation played out. So it's nothing wrong with having a great backup plan. And the reasoning that Gerard Mayo gave for the Patriots even taking Joe Milton in the 6th round was that the man has too much talent to pass up on. And I agree with that. Let me tell you guys a quick story. A few years ago, back when I was a Jet playing football, it was a camp that I went to, and I seen Joe Milton throw in person. And let me tell you guys something. Joe Milton throws the football so beautifully that I would pay $5, $10 to watch it again. I mean, watching this dude throw the football live was a freaking spectacle, man. It was like pay-per-view watching him throw the football. It just comes out so beautifully, so fast, and he just has like unlimited arm strength. I think this dude could throw the whole length of the stadium up there in Gillette, whatever they call it. And if the Patriots can find a way to develop Joe Milton as a more polished passer, improve his footwork and his accuracy, he can not only be a really good backup, but maybe, let's say Drake May does work out. You can use Joe Milton as trade bait, because his upside to me is way higher than Drake May's just because of the arm strength, the athleticism that he has. If Joe Milton puts it all together, he could easily be a top 5, top 10 quarterback in the game. Just with the talent that he has alone, with his arm strength, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a situation where maybe Drake May struggles and then Joe Milton comes in and maybe he outperforms him. He does have way more experience than what Drake May does. Drake May still is fairly raw. He hasn't played as many snaps as what Joe Milton has in college. And Drake May hasn't really looked too hot during, rookie minicamp and OTAs anyway. So for a guy like Joe Milton, this is a really good opportunity for him to play himself into maybe somewhat of a quarterback competition down the road. Of course, Drake May is going to be afforded every opportunity to prove himself as the guy. And I'm not saying that Drake May isn't going to pan out. But my theory is that they got Joe Milton just as an insurance plan, like what the Redskins did back in the day when they drafted Kirk Cousins. And I think that this is a really smart move by the Patriots front office. Hell, like, with how random the NFL is now, this wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world if we see 3-4 years from now, Joe Milton possibly ends up being better than Drake May. This is just the business. It's a performance-based league. And if Drake May doesn't perform as expected and Joe Milton comes in and outplays him, then who's going to end up remaining the QB1 in New England for the foreseeable future? It's going to be Joe Milton. And I think with drafting him and the potential and upside that he has, it's definitely a worthwhile investment. Okay, yes, you can argue and say that he's old and it makes no sense to draft a player of his age. That's a project. And I get that. But you only invest a 6th round pick into him, and who says that the dude just only plays quarterback for New England? Maybe they utilize him as a tight end, or maybe they got some special packages for Joe Milton. Maybe they could use him in, 4th and short, 3rd and short situations with quarterback power. Maybe utilize him on some design quarterback runs. There's a plan in place for Joe Milton, and there's nothing wrong with bringing in some competition. I just think that Gerard Mayo decided to pull the trigger on getting Joe Milton because he does believe in Drake May, but this is just one of those just-in-case moves. And you can never go wrong with having too many quarterbacks on your roster because you never know what can happen. Hell, everybody was bashing the Falcons for drafting Michael Penix at 8, but Kirk Cousins is coming off a concerning Achilles injury. And we don't know if he's still going to be the same quarterback that he was prior to sustaining that injury. So why not just go ahead and just get a backup plan? They always say in life, to never attach yourself to one thing. You always want to have several different plans. You want to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan Z, and maybe a plan F. The Patriots, I think this was a chess move on their behalf. And I really loved the decision to get Joe Milton. I thought it made perfect sense. It's not like he was going to find a impact starting player in the 6th round anyway. Most of the guys who get drafted past round 5 in the last 2 rounds are either going to be backups or they're going to be special teamers, and half of these dudes don't even make the team. And one thing that the Patriots have a really good history of doing is being able to find some late round gems at quarterback that either could be potential trade bait or really serviceable backups that turn into really good starters. So the Joe Milton draft selection, to me, now that I've started to think on it over the last couple of weeks, it makes a ton of sense to me. When I first saw he got drafted by New England, I was a little bit shocked. He even came out and said that he was shocked. But now, with me sitting on it, it makes sense. Don't try to handicap yourself to Drake May if he doesn't work out. You give him 2.5 years, and if he doesn't show you anything promising going into year 3, you cut bait with him, and you give Joe Milton the opportunity if he's proven himself. And Joe Milton, we're talking about all the time that Drake May is going to need to develop. If Drake May ends up starting for the next 2-3 years and he's not good, that allows Joe Milton to continue to develop in the background. Now, he may end up being 29, 30 by the time he's able to be inserted in that starting quarterback conversation if Drake May struggles, but who cares about the age? There are quarterbacks now putting into their late 40s because the NFL is as soft as it's ever been. You can't even touch the quarterback. You can barely even hit the quarterback below the waist anymore. When you go to sack him, or they call a flag on you for unnecessary roughness or roughing the passer. So with the NFL game now favoring quarterbacks and trying to do whatever they can to keep them safe and protected from injuries, Joe Milton, I'm not really worried about the age with him. If it takes him 3 years to develop, but he ends up becoming one of the best quarterbacks in the game, I think that it would end up being a really good thing for them, just in case Drake May doesn't work out. Now, I'm not saying Drake May is going to be a bust. I'm just saying that, to me, this was an insurance policy on behalf of Gerard Mayo, because with him being a defensive-minded coach, and, he may not even get another head coaching opportunity if it doesn't work out in New England, his success largely stems on how well Drake May performs and if he can properly be developed by their offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. But if he doesn't work out, why are you just going to put your whole entire job security on one guy? Why not also have a dice roll just in case? Why not just have something in your back hip pocket just in case? Because I probably would do the same thing. Hell, we saw the 49ers do something similar. They got Trey Lance, and then right after that, they got Brock Purdy in the 7th round. I don't think it was the same year. I think it was the year after that. But I'm just saying, it's always smart to double dip at quarterback in the draft, because you never know with these guys. The NFL is very random. The Jaguars this season, to me, have a great chance to win the AFC South. And you want to know what's funny? Around this same time last year, everybody made it seem like this division was Jacksonville's to lose, and they were declaring the Jaguars as dark horse Super Bowl contenders based on how well this team played under Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence in his 2nd season. They came back from behind in the wild card round against the Chargers, and they gave the Chiefs a pretty competitive game on the road in Arrowhead in the divisional round. But last year, after they got out to that 8-1 start, the season got really ugly for them. But I think this year, it's fair to expect for the Jaguars to have a bounce-back year. And I'm not ready to anoint the Texans yet. Even though I still believe that C.J. Stroud is better than Trevor Lawrence, and I view him as one of the best quarterbacks in the game right now, I'm not saying that he's going to have a sophomore slump, but I'm not going to rule it out. In the NFL, anything can happen. And Jacksonville has a really good team, at least when you look at what they have from a weapon standpoint. You get Brian Thomas Jr. in the 1st round, who comes from LSU. LSU has a really great track record of producing elite wide receivers. You also have Christian Kirk coming back. You signed Gabe Davis in free agency. You got Evan Ingram still and Travis Etienne. There's enough weapons on this team for Jacksonville to compete for the AFC South. The question is, how good is the defense going to be? Because the defense has been one of the biggest Achilles heel that Jacksonville has faced under Doug Peterson. So what did they do to improve it? They bring in former Falcons defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen. And this defense is going to have a night and day difference under him. Last year, he did God's work with Atlanta's defense. And if their offense, with Desmond Ridder at the helm, wasn't so turnover prone, this possibly could have been a top 10 unit last year under Ryan Nielsen. And that was his first year calling plays as a DC. They were 17th in points per game allowed, 10th in yards per game allowed. They were really good situationally. They were 4th in red zone defense and 3rd and 3rd down defense. And they also were really good against the pass. They had a really good pass rush. As a matter of fact, their pass rush was as good as it's been under Ryan Nielsen than it has in previous years. And think about all of the young, talented players that the Jaguars currently have on their roster. Okay, you got Josh Allen, who's coming off a big season, the best season of his career. He had 17.5 sacks. He just got paid. I think under Ryan Nielsen, he'll continue to have Josh Allen sustaining that elite level of play for the foreseeable future. And plus, he's going to be pivotal in helping Trayvon Walker, a former number 1 overall pick by Jacksonville a few years ago. Remember, they took this dude over Aiden Hutchinson because of his upside and his ability to play way more different positions. Well, he had 10 sacks last year, and not a lot of people talked about it. It was a really quiet 10 sacks, but with Ryan Nielsen and how good he is at getting the most out of the pass rush, you could potentially have Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen both giving you 15 sacks this season. Now, that may be, overly optimistic and overambitious, but I expect this pass rush to be really good this year. And Devin Lloyd, he was the most improved player on Jacksonville's defense, according to Pro Football Focus last year. And if he continues to improve, along with Fourier Louis-Caron, who is really good against the run, they're going to have a really good front seven because they signed Arik Armstead in free agency, who still is a really productive player despite his age. And you also get Darnell Savage to help improve your back end. And your back end isn't really that bad neither. Andrew Cisco is pretty good. You have Tyson Campbell, who's pretty solid also. I think that with you getting defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen, this is probably one of the most underrated moves of the whole entire offseasons by any team. One thing that people in the NFL world don't pay a lot of attention to are these staff hires. These staff hires are low-key what can take your team from being a fringe playoff team to a fringe Super Bowl contender. Look at what the Ravens did last year when they hired Todd Monken as their offensive coordinator. He elevated that offense and elevated Lamar to a level that we've never seen in Baltimore before, and it led to Lamar Jackson winning his second MVP. Now, when it comes to Trevor Lawrence, at the end of the day, Jacksonville's success all stems on T-Law. And I think that the national media severely overlooks the impact that Trevor Lawrence has had on Jacksonville. I keep seeing people show the stats of Gardner Minshew and Trevor Lawrence's first 3 years, and they look eerily similar. But I think the stats don't mean jack squat when it comes to T-Law versus Gardner Minshew, because from a talent standpoint, if you have to pick between Gardner Minshew and Trevor Lawrence, we all know who we're picking. We know who's the more talented quarterback. And there was somebody who I was arguing with earlier on the matter saying that, man, the stats tell the story. No, the hell they don't. Because Gardner Minshew, yeah, he may have had, slightly similar stats to Trevor Lawrence his first 3 years, but he wasn't winning no damn games. The dude was a check down machine. He was a decent quarterback for Jacksonville. Once Trevor Lawrence got drafted and they got rid of Urban Meyer, who was one of the worst head coaching hires ever, and they got a true head coach in there in Doug Peterson, they won the division, and they went to the playoffs and won a postseason game. And under Trevor Lawrence, they've played in more primetime games than I can ever remember Jacksonville playing in all my years living in this city. And not just that, but more people have gone to Jacksonville Jaguar games in the past 2 years since T-Law has gotten drafted, since what they ever have gone to in the past decade, bro. Even when Jacksonville went to the AFC Championship a few years back and they got screwed by the refs against New England, there still weren't a lot of people who were showing massive support to that team. You want to know why? Because we all knew how good the defense was, but Blake Bortles was nothing special. And right now, Trevor Lawrence is easily the most talented quarterback that the Jaguars have ever had. And please don't bring up no damn Mark Brunell or David Garrard. Like, those guys were fine. They were solid, but they weren't Trevor Lawrence. Jacksonville didn't start getting any national media attention until Trevor Lawrence had his breakout season in 2022. That's what happens when you get a franchise-changing quarterback. They sell tickets, they sell merch, and they get you in primetime games. Tell me the last time Jacksonville played in a Sunday night football game or a Monday night football game prior to Trevor Lawrence arriving. You can't recall. You're going to have to go way back, probably to maybe the early 2010s or the mid 2000s when they had Fred Taylor or somebody like that. But Trevor Lawrence, he was playing through injuries during the second half of the season. I think that he got banged up during that blowout loss to the 49ers. He tried to play through it, and we just didn't see the Trevor Lawrence that we saw in the previous year or the first half during the season. Because remember, as much as people want to just make it seem like Houston is a lock to win this division, Jacksonville did split the season series with them. The first time, Houston beat them pretty handily. The second time, Jacksonville had their way with them. And I don't think that the gap between the Texans and the Jaguars is that large. And I don't think the gap between C.J. Stroud and Trevor Lawrence is that large neither. C.J. Stroud is probably a top 5 QB. Maybe a fringe top 5 QB, and Trevor Lawrence, without a doubt, is still a top 10 quarterback in the game. And anytime you have quarterbacks that are this good, you're always going to have a chance at winning the division. But it just kind of annoys me how people are making it seem like the AFC South is Houston's to lose. No, the hell is not. We said the same thing about Jacksonville last season, and look what happened. And although Houston is stacked right now with getting Stephon Diggs, you got Tank Dell. You just recently gave your other wide receiver, Nico Collins, a big-time extension. But, how's that offensive line going to look? Yes, you get Joe Mixon, but it's no point in trading for him if the offensive line is going to be as bad when it comes to opening up running lanes than what they were last year. And yes, we know the defense is going to be good, but I think Ryan Nielsen is going to have Jacksonville's defense at least playing at a top 12 level. So I'm not saying that Jacksonville is going to win the AFC South, but what I am saying is that I think that too many people are writing this team off after, they had their expectations not met last season, because too many people tried to rush to anoint Jacksonville and Trevor Lawrence as the next team up to be able to challenge Patrick Mahomes for AFC supremacy. And like I told you guys around this same time last year when you guys called me a hater saying I was hating on Jacksonville because I told y'all they weren't ready. They didn't have enough. And we saw that last year when they crashed and burned in the second half of the season. I think this year, this is a team that's ready to compete somewhat in the AFC. I can see them making it to the conference championship game this year. I don't expect Trevor Lawrence to play the same way that he did in the second half of last season. I've been heavily critical of Trevor Lawrence, but that's only because as a Jacksonville resident, for the people that aren't from the area, they overlook just how much he means to the city. Like, the only thing there is to do in Jacksonville is go to Jacksonville Jaguar games. Like, downtown, it ain't shit to do. We don't even have the Landing no more. They closed that down because somebody was always getting shot and popped and killed down there every single weekend. So you don't got the Landing. You got the scooters downtown, which are fine. But let's be honest, the only thing that there is to do in Jacksonville is go to Jaguar games. And as long as Trevor Lawrence is good, people are going to continue to support the Jags. But if he's not good, and this guy ends up reverting to being a mid quarterback, then it's going to be a giant letdown for the city, and there's going to be no point in investing all these billions of dollars into getting a new stadium built, because you're going to be right back at the drawing board again trying to find a new quarterback. With Trevor Lawrence at the helm, this city has some hope. They have a reason to support the team, and they got a reason to actually go out. even when they had Blake Bortles and he led them to the AFC Championship, like, people still really weren't going to the games like that, because it's a difference when you got a guy like Trevor Lawrence as your quarterback versus a guy like Blake Bortles as your quarterback. Like, you go Blake Bortles, ew. Same thing with Gardner Minshew. It's like, you cool, fam. Like, I had a fun time with Gardner Minshew during his time in Jacksonville before he got traded with the mustache. They had the whole Minshew mania thing circulating on social media and whatnot. But with Trevor Lawrence, though, he just has a different aurora about himself. You feel me? When you see Trevor, you feel that Jacksonville has a chance. Like, the city is really behind this dude. And I don't think that he's a trash quarterback. Is he a little bit overrated? Yes. And right now, the city is still a little bit mad at Trevor Lawrence. But we still cut him a little bit of slack because we know that he put his body on the line playing through those injuries where he probably shouldn't have played. And there are times like that Baltimore game when Trevor Lawrence, when he gets a little rattled, the dude just completely goes off the deep end, bro. He does all kinds of stupid crap. He gets turnover prone. He makes dumb decisions. He's throwing passes in the dirt. Like, y'all saw how ugly that final game last season was against Tennessee. It was really ugly. Like, that was rock bottom for Trevor Lawrence. And I don't think it's going to get any worse than that. I expect this dude to bounce back. Who's going to call the plays is a different story. I expect Doug Peterson to take over play calling again. I get that the brother has some kind of deep love for Press Taylor that he just can't let him go. But I think the bigger problem is not the play calling. It's actually who the general manager is, and that's Trent Baalke. Trent Baalke is one of the worst GMs in the league. I cannot understand for the life of me how this man still has a job when he is terrible at constructing good teams. So, I mean, you get Brian Thomas Jr., who I believe he's going to plan out, but I don't know about all the other draft picks. He doesn't have a good track record of hitting on guys outside the first round. So, I'm pretty confident that Jacksonville shakes back this year, and I wouldn't write them off when it comes to their chances of being able to win the AFC South this year. I think that too many people in the national media are trying to count out Jacksonville because of how ugly the second half of last year went, but we easily overlooked that Jacksonville was 8-1, and they were in first place in the AFC before things went left. So if you can play that way for the first half of the season, there's no reason why you can't replicate the same success this year, even though you have a way more difficult schedule. And the division is going to be way tougher this year with Anthony Richardson going into year 2, being fully healthy, and the Colts having a way better team on offense. But they still got some concerns on defense. Tennessee, they put a team together. I'll give them that. But there's no guarantee that Will Levis is going to pan out. He still has a lot to prove. We know that C.J. Stroud is going to give you good quarterback play for the most part. I'm not expecting him to have a sophomore slump. And you know what Trevor Lawrence gives you when he's playing his best football and he's being consistent, even with the turnovers. He's just one of those quarterbacks that takes a lot of chances and he can be a little bit loosey-goosey with the football. But I don't expect Trevor Lawrence to give Jacksonville anything worse than top 12 QB play. So the two most proven QBs are the ones who I'm going to have the most faith in being able to win this division. I love Anthony Richardson. I think the brother could be in for a breakout season, but that doesn't mean that I'm not skeptical about him. Will Levis, we still don't know. Outside of that one game against Atlanta, everything else looked mid and pedestrian. Can we just be honest about Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns? This dude is scamming Cleveland. They're giving him $230 million fully guaranteed to play like one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think if you're a Browns fan, you got to come to the harsh reality that you're never going to get the version of Deshaun that we saw in Houston. That version is long gone. He's washed. He's cooked. But that doesn't mean that he still can't be serviceable for you. That doesn't mean that he still can't win you some games, because the team that Cleveland has around Deshaun Watson is good enough to win it all this year. They're going to have a great defense. They got one of the best offensive lines in the league this year, because remember last year, their offensive line played really well despite them losing three offensive tackles. They lost their 2 starting goal offensive tackles, and then their standout rookie offensive tackle, DeJuan Jones, he ended up getting injured late during the season, and yet their offensive line still played good enough to help Grandpa Flacco lead this team to the postseason. And if Joe Flacco can lead Cleveland to the playoffs. You mean to tell me that Deshaun Watson, if he just plays at an average, slightly above average level, can't do the same thing? I get that the brother has some really awful performances over the last couple of years since he's come back, but he still has had some flashes in the pan, like against Tennessee and Arizona. And even that come from behind win against Baltimore. I know he didn't look good in the first half, but he looked really damn good in the fourth quarter. But I'm not expecting Deshaun Watson to ever look like an elite quarterback again. And they do bring in Ken Dorsey to be their new offensive coordinator after parting ways with Alex Van Pelt. But their head coach, Kevin Stefanski, he's the dude who's running the show. He's going to be the dude calling the plays. I think Ken Dorsey, him working with Deshaun Watson could be beneficial for him. Even though he got fired by Buffalo, Josh Allen was a little bit hurt about Buffalo's decision to part ways with Dorsey because he gave a lot of respect and a lot of praise to Dorsey and helping him become the quarterback that he is right now. So I think for Cleveland, yes, you are getting scammed by Deshaun. You definitely aren't getting what you paid for. But I still think that this dude can be somewhat decent. But realistically, I don't think that he's going to give you good enough quarterback play this year for you to have the kind of season that you had last year with how difficult your schedule is. You got to play in the AFC North with the Ravens, a healthy Lamar coming off his second MVP. Plus, they got Derrick Henry now. You got Cincinnati with the healthy Joe Burrow. And this is coming from a Steelers fan. Like, the Steelers and the Browns, we very much could be competing for who's going to finish in last place in this division because I don't feel confident about our quarterback situation neither. We got washed behind Russell Wilson, who people still think can be good. Like, he's cooked now. He needs to retire and just be a family man. And then we got Justin, can't read defenses, can't see the fields. It's just, the Steelers and the Browns are in similar situations. So if you're a Cleveland fan, I understand your pain right now because as a Steelers fan, I feel you, bro. I feel you, but you should at least have more confidence in your quarterback situation than what the Steelers have in ours because you got a way higher chance of getting some juice out of Deshaun than the Steelers do getting some juice out of old man Russell Wilson and Justin freaking Fields. And then we hired Arthur Smith to be our offensive coordinator. Like, listen, bro, the Browns are never going to get Houston Deshaun Watson. But I don't think your quarterback situation is that bad where, you give him Jerry Jeudy. You also have Amari Cooper, who continues to produce at a really high level. You got Elijah Moore, who's really good. David Njoku. You're going to have Nick Chubb coming back at some point early during this season. I mean, this team is way too good for Deshaun Watson just to flame out and continue to look like how he's looked the last couple of years. And we also got to remember that the brother ain't played football for 2 years at one point. So, of course, it was going to take some time for him to knock off the rust. Now, I don't even want to get into what happened off the field with him. All I'm going to say is it's a numbers game. You feel me? There's way too many allegations out there for him not to be guilty of, doing a few weird things with at least 2 or 4 of those masseuses. But despite how weird the dude is, the locker room still likes him. He's still respected by his teammates. And I was a little bit hurt to see him break down after he had to say that his season was over after that season-ending injury. But I think he can bounce back, at least in a way where he can give the Browns serviceable quarterback play. But I think the reality is you're never going to get what you paid for out of Deshaun Watson. And when, his contract ends up being all over, it probably would be in your best interest just to find a different quarterback and go in a different direction because he's definitely not worth keeping at the rate that he's getting paid, and if he wants another big contract, you probably say, nah, bro, like, we good off you. We thought we was getting Houston Deshaun. We kind of got a little bit scammed, and we still are getting scammed. But, Deshaun Watson, if he can give Cleveland competent quarterback play, and he plays at least a top 15 level of how good that defense looked under Jim Schwartz last year, there's no reason to expect it to drop off. With the supporting cast that you have now, Jerry Jeudy, this is probably the best quarterback that he's played with up to this point. I think Cleveland can be a solid team if they can just get decent QB play out of Deshaun. Now, are you going to get decent QB play out of Deshaun Watson? I think that you can, but that doesn't guarantee you a spot in the playoffs. You know, like you were able to have the success that you had with Joe Flacco, given the fact that your schedule wasn't that tough. You know, Cincinnati didn't have a healthy Joe Burrow. Now it's a way different division now. And this is arguably the toughest division in the NFL. And top 15 quarterback play may not be good enough to win your games, at least in the AFC North. But we'll see. But I think that Deshaun Watson, you know, I think he's a little cooked. I don't think that we're going to get Houston Deshaun anymore, but that doesn't mean that the Browns still can't win some games with this fool. I still think that there's a little bit juice left in that tank. The Atlanta Falcons defense, in my opinion, is not as bad as what people think. Now, when they decided to take Michael Penix 8th overall in this past year's draft, of course, we were all looking at Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris like, what the F are you fools doing, bro? You fools already paid Kirk Cousins all this damn money. You should have took Dallas Turner. But, you know, after doing some research and going through the Falcons' defensive line and the young upside that they have when it comes to their edge rush position, I understand why they decided to pass on Dallas Turner in the first round when you got a guy like Arnold Ebiketie, who could have a breakout season this year. This dude had 6 sacks and 28 quarterback pressures and only played 384 snaps on defense for Atlanta last year. If this dude ends up being a full-time starter for the Falcons this year, I can easily see him getting a 9, maybe 10 plus sacks this year. Now you got Braylon Trice, who I felt was one of the biggest steals in the draft. You got him in the 3rd round. If he can beat out Lorenzo Carter, he could be what Max Crosby is to the Las Vegas Raiders. I think he's that good. I had a 1st-round grade on him. He has a high motor. If you go and you look at that Michigan game, yes, it was a slaughter fest, but he was the only player on Washington's defense making plays in that game. It seems like every time somebody was making a play for the Huskies against Michigan, it was him. He was a factor in the run. He was also really good at getting after J.J. McCarthy. Like, that dude was a force to be reckoned with last year for Washington. And I was really surprised that he fell all the way to Atlanta in the 3rd round. And that's what kind of made me change my perception about their decision to pass on Dallas Turner in exchange for Michael Penix. Because Braylon Trice, I really thought he was going to be a late 1st rounder, early 2nd round guy. And Arnold Ebiketie, you know, I really think that this dude is going to end up having a big season this year. The interior of your defensive line is also pretty good. You still got Grady Jarrett. We know how good he is when he's healthy. You got David Onyemata. Now you got this Rook Rojo guy from Clemson. He's going to be really good against the run. He still needs more refinement as a pass rusher, but if you watch his Clemson tape, this dude is very violent, very powerful. Like, I had a lot of fun watching this dude play at Clemson last year. This dude has some really good film when he's just pushing guys, running guys over, just powering through guys with a fast first step. Like, it's really fun watching this dude. And one thing that gives me a lot of confidence that the pass rush is still going to be pretty decent despite losing Ryan Nielsen, because Ryan Nielsen, Atlanta's defensive coordinator last year, he was a big reason why your pass rush made such a gradual improvement compared to how it's been in years past. Now, you lose him to Jacksonville, but you got Jimmy Lake replacing him as the defensive coordinator. Now, Jimmy Lake has been a defensive coordinator before. He was a defensive coordinator for Washington before he ended up getting the head coaching job there and getting fired. But when he was calling the plays on Washington's defense as their DC, you know, their defense was one of the best in college football. And Raheem Morris, last year, he did a great job of developing some of the young talent that the Rams had. Because remember, most people didn't think that the Rams were going to be as good as what they were last year. They thought at best they would be a 7-8 win team because of the amount of young guys that they had to play on defense. But you think of a guy like Kobe Turner, who had a really outstanding rookie season. He played on the interior of the defensive line for the Rams. Raheem Morris was a big reason why a lot of those young guys stepped up the way that they did. So I think that he can do the same thing that he did last season with the Rams and Atlanta. Like, there is a lot of young, talented upside on the front 7 of this defense. I mean, you look at the linebacker unit, this is probably one of the most underrated linebacker cores in the National Football League. Not a lot of people talk about how much talent and depth Atlanta has at linebacker. You got Caden Ellis, who's entering his second year with the Falcons after they signed him in free agency last year. He's a jack of all trades guy. He had 122 tackles, 4 sacks. He was 4th in QB pressures from linebackers with 26. He had 11 tackles for loss. Like, this dude was freaking everywhere. Then you got Nate Latman, who was a UDFA from 2022 out of Colorado. He ended up stepping in and having a fantastic season in replace of Troy Anderson, who got a season cut short like week 2, week 3 due to a shoulder and pec injury. And he was a monster. He had 2 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. He had an interception, a few pass breakups, and over 100-plus tackles. And then you got Troy Anderson coming back fully healthy. I still think that Troy Anderson is a starting caliber linebacker. So if you have a guy like Caden Ellis or Nate Latman, God forbid, gets injured, you can still have a guy like Troy Anderson come off the bench and still give you like starting caliber linebacker play. So you got a lot of good depth at linebacker and on the interior of your defensive line. I know you're still looking for proof of, some edge rushers that really could pop off for you. There's another guy that they have from Ohio State. I can't think of his name right now. I'm probably going to have to look that thing up. Zach Harrison, that's his name. I looked it up, people. You're probably going to see me cutting, but Zach Harrison, he had a pretty decent rookie season. He had 3 sacks. He was a former 5-star recruit out of Ohio State who never really lived up to his potential with the Buckeyes because he was playing under a defensive coordinator that underutilized him and wasn't really able to develop him. But with him playing under Raheem Morris, we could potentially see Zach Harrison have a little bit of a breakout year. Now, I'm not expecting him to have the kind of breakout season that Arnold Ebiketie could have, but maybe he can give you 6-7 sacks this year. Maybe 5, 6.5. That would be pretty good. So I look at Atlanta's front 7, and I'm really optimistic about how good it's going to be this year. In the secondary, you lost Jeff Okudah, but he was up and down for you. You got Clark Phillips, who played pretty well. You got A.J. Terrell, who's one of the best corners in the game. You got DeAndre Alford in the slot. Like, one thing that people don't give Terry Fontenot enough credit for is how well he's drafted. And I didn't even realize how good Atlanta's draft classes have been the last couple of years under him. Like, a lot of the guys who ended up having some good rookie seasons under Terry Fontenot were on the defensive end of the football. Outside of Bijan Robinson, they didn't really have too many rookies on offense that they played. I think they had an offensive lineman that was pretty good. But on defense, a lot of their best players were young guys who were replacing guys who didn't really play that good. Like safety DeMarco Hellams. He was a 7th-round pick last year by Terry Fontenot. He took Richie Grant's job late in the season, and he was a big surprise. He had a really good training camp. He was really outstanding in the preseason. He contributed on special teams. When he got his opportunity, he took advantage of that thing. You got Jesse Bates, who is one of the best safeties in the game. He was a first-team All-Pro selection last year. So there's a lot to like about Atlanta's defense. I just think that there's a little bit too much pessimism, if that's even a word, when it comes to looking at Atlanta's defense and evaluating it for this season, because I understand that when you look at Atlanta's depth chart, there's no big names that pop out to you. You're probably like, bro, who the hell is Zach Harrison? Who is this Brandon Dolores dude? Who is Braylon Trice? Who the hell is Lorenzo Carter? Like, Lorenzo Carter's probably the only guy that, if he ends up starting on defense for Atlanta this year, I think they will have a problem, because at best, he's going to give you 3.5 sacks. He's just one of those guys that's just meant to be a good rotational backup piece. He's not meant to be a starter. Braylon Trice, if he ends up starting over Lorenzo Carter this year, I think he'll give you Max Crosby kind of rookie production, because Max Crosby, similar to Braylon Trice, was a mid-round selection, and he ended up having like 6-7 sacks his rookie season for Las Vegas in his first year. I think Braylon Trice could have a similar impact year 1 for Atlanta. So there's a lot to be confident about when it comes to Atlanta's defense being able to sustain the level of play that they had last year. There were many Falcons fans who wanted to retain Ryan Nielsen, but the fact that Jacksonville got him was a big pickup. But I think that Atlanta's defense is in pretty good hands with Raheem Morris. He isn't going to be calling the plays. He's going to be delegating those responsibilities to Jimmy Lake so he can focus more so on being a head coach. And despite the draft class that Atlanta has had this past year, I still got a lot of confidence in Raheem Morris as a head coach. I pick Atlanta to be the winner of the NFC South this year. Like, if they don't win the NFC South this year, I think that's a fireable offense for Raheem Morris. And you Falcons fans may say that that's a little bit too tough, that's a little bit too harsh, but this is the most talented team in the NFC South division this year. There's no reason why Atlanta should win anything less than 10 games, especially with the weak schedule that they have. This is a good enough defense that they should play at a top 15 level or better. I think top 15 is the floor for Atlanta. The ceiling probably could be a top 8 defense. They already were really good against the pass. In the pass rush, yeah, you did lose Bud Dupree. You also are deciding not to bring back Calais Campbell, but those guys are up there in age. Bud Dupree is one of those on and off kind of players that sometimes he's good, sometimes he's not good. It just depends on the scheme and the team that he's on. Calais Campbell, like the dude, yeah, he still is productive, but eventually the dude's going to drop off eventually. So with Atlanta deciding to bank on the young, talented core that they have, I'm willing to bet that a lot of these guys end up having breakout seasons, because if you look at Terry Fontenot's past draft classes, they've been really productive, especially the guys that he's drafted on the defensive side from last season. Like, a lot of those guys had some big impacts last year. The last thing I want to talk about is this. I expect Malik Nabers to have a big-time rookie season for the New York Giants. I love this guy's demeanor. He's all business, no friends. There are Giants fans that are a little concerned at times about him because they feel like he does want to be a New York Giant, but he's not one of those guys that you're always going to see trotting around with a smile on his face. Like, he's just all business. And one thing about Malik Nabers is that he's a force to be reckoned with after the catch. He's going to be running a lot of guys over because there are a lot of defensive backs that don't like to tackle in today's NFL, and they're going to be in for a rude awakening when they see big, aggressive Malik Nabers running at them. What I love about Malik Nabers the most is that this dude just has so much suddenness, so much explosiveness when he comes off the line. It's ridiculous, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up establishing himself as a top 10 wide receiver this year. He is going to be my wide receiver 1 in all of my fantasy leagues this year. And I don't care if he has Daniel Jones throwing him the football. You see, when you're as bad as what Daniel Jones is, there's no reason why you shouldn't be targeting a guy like Malik Nabers every single play. Malik Nabers is going to make Daniel Jones look like a better quarterback than what he actually is. This is going to be one of the rare occurrences where you see a wide receiver be good enough to elevate poor quarterback play. That's what Malik Nabers is good enough to do. And, initially when the draft process came around back in January and people were saying that Malik Nabers was just as good or better than Marvin Harrison Jr., I thought they were tripping. But when I got into this dude's film and I watched him play at LSU, this dude is a freaking monster. I love him to have a better rookie season than Marvin Harrison, bro, because he's just so explosive. You can use him on wide receiver sweeps, maybe even let him run a little bit of wildcat. Like, the New York Giants are not going to be a good team this year. But at least Malik Nabers could be the main reason why you turn on Giants games if you are a fan of the New York Giants. Malik Nabers is going to be the best player on the Giants offense this year. If I had to give you guys a projection for how I think his stats are going to look this season, I think he's probably going to have 110 receptions, 150 targets. He's probably going to have like 1,100, 1,200 receiving yards, and probably 12 to 13 touchdowns because, listen, this pretty much should be the New York Giants' entire offense, running it through Malik Nabers. And then you also do have Wan'Dale Robinson. I think he can be pretty good for the Giants this season. Like, Daniel Jones, he may be arguably the worst quarterback in the league, but it's hard for him to play as bad as what he did last year when you're throwing to a stud like Malik Nabers. Like, this guy is already my favorite wide receiver in the league. I love his personality. He's all business. no friends. You know, when he steps on that football field, he's violent. He's like a running back when he gets the football in his hands after the catch. And as I said earlier, if you're a cornerback and you see Malik Nabers coming at you, there are a lot of guys who are not going to want to tackle this dude. And I promise you, there's going to be some DBs that make a lot of business decisions when it comes to getting Malik Nabers down. They're probably going to take the easy way out, try to go for his ankles. You don't want to see this dude head up because he's going to embarrass you. He's like a mixture of DJ Moore and AJ Brown put together. You know, he has the explosiveness that DJ Moore has after the catch, being so physical, being able to just run through guys, but also he has the ability to win those 50-50 balls downfield. This is a wide receiver that can do every single thing that the New York Jets want him to do. So I'm expecting this dude to submit himself as one of the best wide receivers in the game in year one. You look at how good Puka Nacua was for the Rams last year. I think that Malik Nabers could have a similar season to what he had, just maybe not 1,400 yards because, you know, playing with Daniel Jones is going to somewhat hinder your stats just a tad bit. Okay, I don't think you're going to be an all-pro with a guy like Daniel Jones throwing you the football, but Malik Nabers, he came out and initially made a bet with Jaden Daniels for winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, but they ended up having to just get rid of it because of the NFL's gambling policy. But I really felt like he could win that thing. Truthfully, outside of Caleb Williams and maybe Bo Nix, like I think Malik Nabers, if I had to choose a non-quarterback rookie to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, I'd pick Malik Nabers. Like, I love this dude. This dude is going to be an absolute stud for the New York Giants this year. He's a pretty good route runner, explosive, great after the catch. Like, you do not want to see Malik Nabers 101 if you're a cornerback, bro, because I promise you this dude is going to embarrass a lot of corners who hate to tackle. He's going to be a handful this year. So if you're a Giants fan, you're not going to be good this year, but if you need a reason to tune into the games, Malik Nabers is that reason. So this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed, give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. Remember, we're not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find us on all podcasting platforms, wherever you get your pods from. Follow me on Instagram at JTSports_ and on X at JTSports__. And I will see you guys shortly with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast.